We're back on the second channel and we're here at the Miami house. But it's broken that part of the chassis.
Everyone blame Bob. The forums blame Bob. The comments blame Bob. Even the mechanics blame Bob. But Matt just said something that nobody expected. Stop blaming Bob. And now the entire story is flipped upside down. Because what actually caused that radiator to fail was something far more shocking. Something the experts missed. Something that was hiding in plain sight the entire time. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you are going to question everything you thought you knew about this case. It started with a puddle. Just a small, innocent puddle of coolant sitting underneath a car that by all accounts should have been perfect. This wasn't some beat-up old banger. This was a well-maintained vehicle, serviced regularly, loved by its owner. And yet there was green fluid, slowly dripping, slowly dying. The owner noticed it on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, the temperature gauge was creeping. By Thursday, the engine was running hot. They took it in immediately. And that's when Bob entered the picture. Bob, the mechanic who had last serviced this car, suddenly became the most talked about name in the entire community. Because someone posted about the leak online. And within hours, the accusations started flying. Bob overfilled the coolant. Bob used the wrong fluid. Bob cross-threaded the hose clamp. The internet had already made up its mind. Bob was guilty. But here's what nobody knew yet. Bob hadn't even touched the cooling system. Now, let's be fair to Bob for a second. Bob is not a bad mechanic. In fact, by all the records available, Bob is a decent mechanic. Experienced. Methodical. The kind of guy who torques bolts to spec and actually reads service bulletins. When the accusations hit, Bob didn't stay quiet. He came out swinging. He had the invoices. He had the job sheets. He had proof that the last service he performed was an oil change and a brake fluid top-up. The cooling system he never opened, never touched, never went near it. But the internet doesn't care about invoices. The comments kept coming. The forum threads got longer. And poor Bob, a man just trying to do his job, found himself at the center of a massive online pylon. And then Matt watched the video. Now, if you don't know Matt Watson from CarWow, is one of the most respected automotive voices on YouTube. Millions of subscribers, years of experience, and a reputation for calling things exactly as he sees them. No sugarcoating. Matt watched the footage. Matt read the thread. Matt looked at the evidence. And Matt said, stop blaming Bob, because Bob didn't do this. The comment section exploded. But why was Matt so sure? What had he seen that everyone else had missed? Here's where it gets fascinating. When you actually look at the radiator, really look at it, the leak wasn't coming from a hose connection. It wasn't a clamp failure. It wasn't even a crack fitting. The leak was coming from the radiator matrix itself. And that changes everything. A radiator matrix failure isn't caused by a mechanic making a mistake during a service. It's not caused by someone over-tightening a hose or using the wrong clamp. A matrix failure is caused by one of three things: age and corrosion. The internal passages break down over time, metal fatigues, seals deteriorate. It's physics. It's chemistry. It's inevitable on an old enough radiator. An impact, a stone strike, a minor collision, something hitting the front of the car and creating a microfracture that takes months, sometimes years, to fully develop into a visible leak. Or, and this is the one that makes people uncomfortable, poor coolant maintenance over a long period of time. And here's the brutal truth that nobody in that comment section wanted to hear. The coolant in this car hadn't been changed in years. The inhibitors were depleted. The pH was off. The fluid had become corrosive, slowly eating away at the radiator from the inside out. And whose job is it to recommend a coolant flush? Not Bob's, because Bob was never booked in for cooling system work. The owner had never asked for it, never been told it was needed, and so it never happened. But here's what nobody was talking about. There was a moment in the original video, blink and you'll miss it, where the mechanic inspecting the car holds up the coolant cap. Look at the underside of that cap. There's a brown sludgy residue coating the inside. Crusty, layered, the kind of buildup that doesn't happen overnight. That's months, Possibly years of neglected coolant breaking down, oxidizing, and depositing itself around every surface it touches. That cap tells a story. And the story it tells is this cooling system has been screaming for attention for a long, long time. Matt saw that cap. Matt knew what it meant. And that's why Matt defended Bob. Because Bob's service his car 6 months ago, maybe a year ago, the damage visible in that cap didn't happen in 6 months. That's a residue of a cooling system neglected across multiple service intervals, across multiple years, possibly across multiple owners. Bob didn't cause this. Time caused this. Neglect caused this. And uncomfortably, the owner's lack of knowledge about coolant maintenance caused this. Now, before anyone comes at me in the comments, I'm not saying the owner is a bad person. Most people have absolutely no idea that coolant needs to be changed. Nobody talks about it. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. It doesn't come up in conversation. But that ignorance destroyed a radiator. And it nearly destroyed an engine. Let's talk about how bad this actually was. Because a radiator leak isn't just an inconvenience. It's not just a trip to the garage and a 200-pound bill, left unchecked, even for a relatively short period. A coolant leak triggers a catastrophic chain of events. First, the coolant level drops. The system runs lean. The thermostat opens to try and compensate, but there's not enough fluid to do the job. Then the temperature climbs. Slowly at first, then faster. The ECU starts seeing readings it doesn't like. Warning lights come on, if you're lucky enough to have them and paying enough attention to notice. Then the head gasket comes under pressure. The aluminum expands. The tolerances tighten. The gasket, designed to seal at normal operating temperatures, starts to struggle. And if you keep driving, head gasket failure, warped head, coolant mixing with oil, white smoke from the exhaust, an engine that is for all practical purposes dead. A 200-pound radiator repair becomes a 2,000-pound or 3,000-pound or write-off situation. This car came within a whisker of that outcome. The owner caught it just in time. Just barely. A few more miles. A few more degrees. And we'd be having a very different conversation right now. So when Matt stood up and said stop blaming Bob, he wasn't just defending one mechanic. He was pointing at something much bigger. He was pointing at a gap in automotive education that is costing people thousands of pounds every single year. See, the Bob situation is a symptom of a much larger problem. We live in a world where everyone knows you need to change your engine oil. It's drilled into us. Oil change every 10,000 miles, every year, whatever the manufacturer says. People know this. But coolant, brake fluid, transmission fluid, power steering fluid. Ask the average car owner when their coolant was last changed and watch their face go blank. Most manufacturers recommend a coolant change every 2 to 5 years depending on the fluid type. Some extended life coolants claim longer intervals. But here's the reality. Most cars on the road right now are running on coolant that is way past its service life. And the mechanics getting blamed when radiators fail. They're often the ones who spotted the problem but couldn't fix it because they weren't booked in for cooling system work. Or the ones like Bob who never even saw the engine bay because the job sheet said oil and brakes. Matt's defense of Bob wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It was logical. Look at the evidence. Look at the timeline. Look at the cap. Look at the matrix. This failure had been building for years. It was going to happen regardless of who serviced the car last. Bob just happened to be the most recent name on the invoice. So Bob took the blame. That's not justice. That's a mob. And in the automotive world, and honestly in life, mob justice almost never gets it right. So what happened in the end? The radiator was replaced. The coolant system was flushed, properly this time. Fresh fluid, correct spec, correct concentration. The car lives on. Bob is still out there turning wrenches, hopefully with a slightly thicker skin after this whole ordeal. And the original poster, to their credit, came back. They updated the thread. They acknowledged that after looking at the full picture, the blame had been misplaced. It wasn't a long apology. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. And Matt moved on to the next video, as he does. But the lesson here is one that every car owner needs to hear. And every person who's ever jumped into a comment section to blame a mechanic needs to sit with. Cooling systems don't just fail overnight. They fail slowly. They fail quietly. They fail because of the small decisions or non-decisions made over years of ownership. Change your coolant. Check your coolant. Know what your coolant looks like when it's healthy versus when it's dying. And maybe, just maybe, before you type a mechanic's name in a comment section and light the torches, read the invoice first. If this video opened your eyes, even a little, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel more than you know. Drop a comment below. Have you ever blamed someone for a car problem and later found out you were completely wrong? I want to hear the stories. The comment section is open. And if you want more automotive breakdowns, drama, and content that actually teaches you something, subscribe and hit the bell. New videos go up regularly, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one. Don't neglect your coolant, and don't blame Bob. And if you really think about it, this was never just about a radiator or even coolant. It was about how quickly people jump to blame without understanding the full picture. Because blame is easy, it's instant. It gives you a target, but real answers take time. In the case of cars, taking a wrong shortcut can cost you far more than just money. It can mean ignoring the actual issue while it quietly gets worse over months or even years. Because cooling systems don't suddenly fail overnight. They degrade slowly as coolant loses its protective properties, as corrosion builds up inside unseen passages, as hoses weaken and pressure systems lose efficiency. All of it happening silently while the car continues to run just fine. Until one day it doesn't. And that's when panic kicks in and fingers start pointing, usually at the last person who touched the car, even if they were only there for a completely unrelated job. And that's the part most people miss. Mechanics work within the scope. They don't rewrite the maintenance history of a vehicle. They deal with what's in front of them. And when that history has years of skipped services or overlooked warning signs, the failure was already set in motion long before they ever picked up a wrench, which is exactly why understanding the bigger picture matters so much. Because cars are systems, not isolated parts, and when one component fails, it's often the result of multiple small factors adding up over time, and the same pattern applies outside of cars too, in how people react to problems in general, jumping to conclusions, following the loudest voices, assigning blame before asking the right questions, when in reality the truth is almost always layered, requiring patience and a willingness to look deeper. And that's what separates someone who keeps running into the same problems from someone who actually learns and improves. Because once you start paying attention, checking fluid condition, following proper service intervals, noticing small changes in performance, you shift from reacting to preventing. And prevention will always be cheaper, easier, and less stressful than dealing with a full breakdown. But beyond the technical side, there's also a human element. Because behind every invoice is a real person, someone doing their job with the information and time they have, and turning them into the face of a problem they didn't cause doesn't just miss the point. It damages trust and makes it harder to have the kind of honest, productive conversations that actually solve issues, which is why the better question is never who's at fault, but what actually happened? Because that's where real understanding begins. And once you start thinking that way, not just with cars, but with everything, you stop chasing quick answers and start seeing the full story. And in that full story, most failures aren't sudden or mysterious. They're the result of small, overlooked decisions catching up. And the only way to avoid them is to stay aware, stay informed, and take responsibility for the things that quietly matter long before they become impossible to ignore. And if you follow that idea just a little further, you start to realize that what feels like a sudden failure is almost never sudden at all. It's just a moment where a long chain of quiet, invisible problems finally becomes impossible to ignore, because every system in a car, especially something like cooling, is built on balance, pressure, chemistry, and time. And the moment one of those factors starts drifting out of spec, even slightly, the clock starts ticking not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily as protective additives in the coolant break down, as microscopic corrosion begins to form along metal surfaces, as tiny deposits restrict flow through narrow passages like the heater core or radiator channels, reducing efficiency bit by bit, until the system that once handled heat effortlessly is now working harder and harder just to keep up. And all of this is happening while the driver experiences nothing unusual, no warning light, no obvious symptom, just normal daily use masking a slow decline. which is exactly why people are caught off guard when failure finally shows itself, because from their perspective it feels instant, unfair even, like something went wrong out of nowhere, when in reality the evidence has been there the entire time, just not in ways they were trained to recognize. And that gap between perception and reality is where blame tends to grow, because when you don't understand a timeline, you compress it, you reduce years of gradual wear into a single moment, a single visit, a single person.